Welcome back to the final part of our explainer on the philosophy of justice. If you were with us for part 2, you'll remember we laid down the foundation for John Rawls' famous theory of justice as fairness. We looked at his core principles and how they stack up in a very strict, unbreakable order of priority, right? First comes liberty, then equal opportunity, and finally, the difference principle. Well, today, we're going to see exactly where this theoretical framework ultimately lands in practice, and, of course, how some other major thinkers responded to it. So, what does this all mean when we put it together? What is Rawls' ultimate conclusion here? Well, for Rawls, justice absolutely does not mean simply rewarding people who happen to be born with superior abilities. He calls that the ethics of reward, and it's just not what he's about. Instead, his entire system is built on what he calls the ethics of redress. This is the idea that society actually needs to compensate those who are endowed with lesser ability or find themselves in a disadvantaged starting position. And because his theory relies so heavily on this idea of redress, it makes total sense why Rawls's framework firmly, and I mean firmly, supports the existence of a welfare state funded by taxation to actively achieve that level of fairness. Now, you might be wondering, does that mean he's completely anti-capitalist? Actually, no. Rawls doesn't reject capitalism entirely. He readily acknowledges that it provides the highest overall standard of living for a society. But, and this is a huge but, he argues that the inequality created by capitalism is justified only if it ultimately works to the benefit of the least advantaged section of society. That is literally the crucial, non-negotiable condition running through his entire framework. But, Rawls certainly isn't the only voice in this massive debate. To really grasp the landscape of justice, we have to step back and look at a few alternative perspectives to round out the picture. Let's start with Robert Nozick. His entitlement theory of justice takes a wildly different position. For Nozick, it's all about the free exercise of property rights. He argues that if property was acquired justly in the first place, then the holder is absolutely entitled to keep it, period. No forced redistribution like Rawls wants. Then, swinging to the other end of the spectrum, you have Marxist justice. Marxists argue that the capitalist system itself is inherently unjust. This echoes the need-based approach we talked about in Part 1, where contribution and benefit aren't tied to property or personal merit at all. And sitting right there in the middle ground, we have democratic socialism, which tries to retain democratic structures and personal freedoms while actively pursuing those socialist economic ideals. It's honestly pretty amazing to look at the massive amount of ground we've covered across this three-part explainer. I mean, we zoomed all the way out to the ancient era with Plato's idea of everyone keeping to their assigned station and Aristotle's concept of equal treatment. Then we moved through those 19th century ideas of rights-based, desert-based, and need-based justice before finally arriving in the 20th century with Rawls' justice as fairness and Nozick's entitlement theory. So we have Rawls calling for us to compensate the least advantaged, Nozick fiercely defending property rights, and Marxists rejecting the capitalist system outright. It's a lot to weigh up, but really, where you ultimately land in this sprawling debate depends entirely on how you answer one single core question, a question that Rawls himself just keeps returning to. What does society owe its most disadvantaged members?